Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping straight into a genuinely terrifying historical and scriptural mystery. We're going to unpack the narrative of a massively prosperous civilization that literally vanished overnight. We'll be examining the story of the people of Prophet Lut exactly as it's preserved in the Quran and Islamic tradition. So we're going to trace this step-by-step journey from their rise, through their extreme corruption, all the way to the sudden, total erasure of this ancient society. Let's get right into it.
I mean, just imagine it for a second. An entire civilization so deeply, fundamentally corrupted that it ignored absolutely every single warning sent by God. We are looking at a society where immorality didn't just exist on the fringes, it was totally normal. It was the standard. Where crime was actively celebrated instead of condemned, and where travelers were terrified, literally terrified of even entering their cities. It was a place where the very prophet sent to guide them was openly mocked and threatened in the streets. And then, as our source material describes it, in a single, violently abrupt stroke of divine judgment, they were completely erased from the earth.
Part 1. Wealth, Rebellion, and Corruption. So, according to Islamic tradition, to really grasp this collapse, we first have to understand who Prophet Lut actually was. Known as Lot, or Lut in Arabic, he was a prophet sent by Allah, and he was actually the nephew of the prophet Abraham, or Ibrahim. After traveling with Ibrahim for years, Allah sent Lut to a very specific nation located in this exceptionally fertile region right near the Dead Sea. But here's where we see this wild juxtaposition in how their society functioned. On one hand, they were swimming in immense physical prosperity. We're talking flourishing trade routes, incredibly fertile land, and extremely comfortable, easy lives. But as the sources clearly describe, all of that physical wealth was completely overshadowed by a total moral bankruptcy. Instead of showing any kind of gratitude for what they had, the texts explain that they fell into an extreme collapse of morals. They openly rebelled against divine commands, they mocked the very concept of goodness, and they started proudly committing entirely new public sins.
Let's look exactly at what that moral bankruptcy entailed. The source material outlines the specific sins of the Qawm Lut, the people of Lut. They actively rejected the natural relationships created by Allah, openly engaging in same-sex acts between men while totally abandoning women as spouses. And the Quran explicitly notes these were acts that hadn't been practiced openly by any previous nations. It was unprecedented. But the corruption didn't stop there. It ran through literally every level of their society. They systematically robbed travelers. They harassed visitors. They committed public indecency out in the open. In this society, the text tells us, sin essentially became entertainment. Doing the right thing, that became something to point at and laugh at. They just completely hardened their hearts and ignored every single warning they were given.
Part 2. The prophets ignored warnings. Day after day, Prophet Lut worked tirelessly to guide his people back to purity and honesty. He constantly reminded them, worldly life is temporary. Every deed is eventually going to be judged by Allah. He called them toward marriage, toward honesty, toward obedience. But how did they respond to all this? The sources record this chilling demand from the people: expel him and his followers from the city. They just arrogantly laughed in his face. The leaders actually dared him, demanding that he bring about this supposed punishment immediately if he was really telling the truth. Instead of looking inward, instead of reflecting and changing their behavior, their immediate instinct was just to threaten to silence the messenger forever.
Part 3. The strangers and the mob.
Okay, so the pacing of the narrative shifts dramatically right here. It turns into this incredibly suspenseful timeline of events on what would be their final night. Ordinary life in the city is suddenly interrupted when several incredibly handsome young strangers arrive. Now, what the people didn't know was that these strangers were secretly angels in disguise, sent directly by Allah. First, these angels actually visit Prophet Ibrahim to let him know that a massive punishment is about to descend on the people of Lut. Next, they travel straight to Lut's home, and Lut is immediately terrified. He knows exactly how evil his people are, and he is genuinely fearing for his guests' safety, and honestly, his fears are entirely justified. News of these handsome strangers spreads like wildfire through the town, and before long, a malicious mob is rapidly gathering right outside Lut's house with the worst possible intentions. And this all culminates in a shocking final event where the attackers are blinded, which unfolds in mere moments.
With the massive mob outside, we see this desperate plea completely ignored. The crowd was demanding, practically screaming that Lut hand over his guests. You can literally feel the tension at the door. Lut pleaded with them. He begged them not to disgrace him in front of his guests. He urged them to fear Allah and just walk away from these evil intentions, but they flat out refused. The source text tells us their desires had completely blinded them to any kind of reason.
And right at that terrifying climax, when it looks like the door is going to break down,
everything changes. The angels suddenly reveal their true identity to Prophet Lut with a promise, "Do not fear, no one will be able to harm you." And at that exact moment, Allah causes the attacking mob outside to completely lose their sight. They go entirely blind. They are left confused, stumbling around in the dark, unable to even find the door to enter the house. And you have to realize, this sudden blinding wasn't just some quick defense mechanism. It was the final, undeniable sign before the ultimate judgment came down.
Part 4. The Night of Devastation. So, with the attackers totally neutralized out front, the warning period was officially over. Time was up. The time for divine judgment had absolutely arrived. The angels give Lut these incredibly strict, life-saving instructions to escape the doom that is about to drop. Step 1, leave the city before dawn. Step 2, take your family with you. And Step 3, which is probably the most haunting instruction of all, do not look back. But right here, there is a really tragic mini-narrative embedded within this escape, and it's this. Faith is not inherited. There was one major exception to who was going to be saved. Lot's own wife would remain behind. Even though she literally lived in the home of a prophet, she had rejected his message. She had consistently sided with the corrupt people of the city over her own husband. And this brilliantly illustrates a core theme of the entire narrative. Everyone, absolutely everyone, is accountable for their own choices. Being physically close to righteousness doesn't save you if your own heart is corrupt. As dawn finally approached, the horrifying climax began. The Quran describes Allah commanding the angel Jibril, or Gabriel, to carry out the decree. Islamic tradition describes the cities literally being lifted high into the heavens and then violently flipped upside down. The earth itself trembled with these devastating earthquakes, collapsing all of their prosperous buildings. And finally, a terrifying rain of stones made of baked clay fell from the sky, with each stone specifically destined for those who had rejected the truth. Within mere moments, the entire civilization was entirely obliterated. And that actually brings us to the geographical reality today. The Dead Sea region, which, remember, was once this deeply fertile land hosting incredibly wealthy, prosperous cities, was reduced entirely to ruins. It was wiped out so completely that, to put it into perspective, today it stands out geographically as one of the lowest places on planet Earth. The civilization simply disappeared beneath the devastation. Part 5. Lessons from the Ruins. So what does this all mean for us? Why does this ancient narrative matter today? Well, the sources distill several core lessons meant to act as a timeless warning about universal themes of justice, morality, and accountability. First up, immense wealth cannot save a corrupt nation from collapse. Doesn't matter how rich you are. Second, worldly power cannot protect the unjust from ultimate justice. Third, mocking truth and righteousness, that has severe consequences. Fourth, and we saw this so clearly with Lut's wife, individual accountability is absolute. You and you alone own your choices. And finally, repentance remains open for everyone, but only until judgment finally arrives. The overarching message here is super clear. While divine mercy is incredibly vast, persistent arrogance and the stubborn rejection of truth lead to inevitable, catastrophic consequences. Generations have risen, generations have fallen. Empires have completely disappeared into the dust. But the warning of the people of Lut, that remains completely unchanged. Every civilization is judged not merely by its economic strength or its physical prosperity, but by its moral choices and exactly how it responds to the truth. So the real question is, how will history remember yours? It's a pretty profound reflection on our own society and the choices we make every single day. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and as always, keep seeking the truth behind the history.